Yeah,
All right.
welcome to another Humpday Q&A with all the usual suspects, I think.
Yeah, that's right. It's some unusual suspects. That's always the fun
some
part.
unusual suspects.
That's
So
right.
Scott can't join us today, but we'll go for the usual quickly and we get to the questions. So
Yes, right.
quickly get your questions in, get your cues in. So we've got some guests with us. So
Yes, we do.
We'll
We'll get to those in a
just
second.
me.
Yep.
Right. Let's do the thing. Right. So do's and
we
don'ts.
do that.
Randall, go for it. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So be nice to people. I mean, we're all here to enjoy our each other's company, as well as hopefully get educated in some new things, get some questions answered, that sort of stuff. But just be nice through that. Don't post any adult content, rude stuff, anything like that. We do have moderation power in the chat. We will take advantage of that when necessary. Again, don't advertise or promote anything. Don't spam. If you post things multiple times, you will be muted. We'll send you a little timeout and you won't get to post anything more. Also, if you repeat your question, I put the later question in the queue and take out the earlier one. So you lose your place in line. So only post your questions once. Be assured I have one job, and that's watching that chat. So they are being seen and they are being noted for us to be able to answer a little bit later. No harassment at all. Again, instant bye-bye for that. And do have a good time. Again, let's emphasize that. We enjoy doing this show. We hope you enjoy participating in it. And for those of you in the live chat, yes, we'll be taking your questions. If you're just watching this on a playback, please come join us live sometime. It's a lot more fun, I tell you, to interact with us while we're here and while you can ask more questions. So there, how's that, Simon? Good enough?
Oh, yeah, sounds good. Perfect.
Okay.
All right, and let's do some quick introductions. My name's Simon Lightfoot, Flutter Community Leader, CTO at Dev Angels London, and you can follow me on Twitter at Dev Angels London. Scott can't be with us, I'm afraid, but there's all his details. Randall, introduce yourself.
I am Randall Schwartz. I am a Dart and Flutter developer, as well as a Dart and Flutter Google developer expert, one of the first in the groups. And all that means is I get to talk to a lot of people. I get to talk to y'all like an hour or two every day on every possible place you can ask questions. I'm probably there answering them. And for this show, I am the question magician, as the title has been given to me. I am watching the chat, watching for you to put Q: in front of your question. And there's the trick. Remember this. If you want to get in the queue for the questions, put a Q in front of your question. Oh, that's so clever. What a great alliteration. Okay. Yeah, it was accidental one day when I said that, and I've just been using it ever since. So there we go.
And we have a few guests joining us, and we'd like to introduce them. So Danielle, welcome to the stage.
Hey, everybody.
How was your time at Kenya?
Kenya was amazing. I besides Flutter Forward being a great event, I did a safari after that. So that was 5 days out with the animals. It was amazing.
Awesome.
But it was awesome seeing all of the people out there and seeing old friends and making new ones.
And we also have, I'm going to pronounce his name wrong, Mangirdas. And that's about as good as I'm going to get. Well, go on. How am I saying it wrong? Tell me.
It's Mangirdas.
Yeah,
And
Mangirdas.
honestly, I remember only one person during the some kind of online conference that did it right from the first time. So you shouldn't feel sorry or something like that. So
you're in the majority, Simon.
I was going to say, Danielle, please. Sorry, introduce yourself. Yeah, go for it. Do you want to Oh.
Danielle, he's saying, introduce yourself.
Yeah. Introduce myself. Hi, I'm Danielle. I'm
Flutteristas. The rest of it. I don't know.
I organize the Flutteristas, which for any female and non-binary Flutter enthusiasts out there, hit me up and I'll get you in. We're a little bit backed up on getting people in, so it's better if you just contact me directly, and I'll help make it happen. I live in Florida. I lead a team of 4 Flutter developers, and so that is me. And I'm trying to be a regular. I'm trying to lose that guest title.
It takes a year or two. Let me trust me.
I'm working at it. I'm working on it. I'll miss next week though, but I'm working on it.
Cool.
Man,
Glad to have
I'm
you.
going to say it wrong again. Say it again one more time. Come on.
It's Mangirdas.
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 Yeah, the Danielle actually get it quite right. Nice.
Cool.
Danielle gets the gold star. Go on, sorry,
Yeah.
Mangirdas, introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. I'm Mangirdas. I'm GD from Lithuania. I'm also an organizer of a local meetup group here of Flutter Vilnius, and we'll have an event actually. If you want to come to visit the country, now we can get the Flutter Forward extended event also.
Nice.
Usually, you can see me on Twitter posting useless stuff like memes and other terrible jokes. But yeah, happy to be there for the first time actually, because I had a reason why I hadn't joined these streams previously. So now I am free and now I can do that.
Cool. Good to have you here. Thank you. Takes the pressure off of me being the sole GDE most of the time. So thank you. Now we have stereo GDEs. This is great.
I'm not a GDE. Oh no.
Me either.
Okay.
So I'm kind of curious. What did you think of Mangirdas? What did you think of the Flutter Forward announcements? What was your favorite piece?
Good question, because during that time I was in Berlin because we had a GDE summit during that time. So I missed the event because I was traveling at that time, but I watched the recording later, and all of the spoilers were already there on Twitter and on other social media channels. I mean, I really enjoyed that it was really the forward part mostly in this event, like what are the plans next, what are the plans for the future, and in that sphere. So that was interesting. I mean, what I missed actually, maybe that's important, when people are presenting Dart, they are getting with type matching and whatnot. That's the records and other stuff. But I missed the static meta programming there, and actually I wasn't the first one who missed those there, because that's a dangerous field to step in, I think. So maybe they avoided to mention that.
No, I think we spoke to who was on the show the week after. Kevin Moore. Kevin Moore dropped by. No, it was straight after the event. Kevin Moore dropped by, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Straight after this thing, and he was saying that it's good. It's basically taking a lot more than what they realized to get that in there, and it's going to take a lot. I think it's going to take more time. So, but they think that the pattern matching that is easier and quicker to get in than it is the static meta program.
Makes sense, because I see that that static meta program was still on the roadmap, which is available and public on GitHub, and you could see that. I think it was still there, just it wasn't mentioned there. About the event, I hope, and Danielle could confirm this, it would be more fun to be there in person, I think. But yeah, I still get the vibes from the event. I still see, what was happening there. So a success. I would say that the event was a success as usual, because we usually have this one, start of the year event of Flutter, just getting that tone for the remaining year. So I think it was that.
I really like the idea that extend is happening, not just happening on the day, but like around the dates, because it kind of gives people in their local areas a chance to kind of get together and get involved as well. So we did one in London. We had I think it was about 150 people, to the event, which is actually quite a sizable number. That's quite, Google's office.
Right?
Sorry?
You had Khan there, right? Didn't she show up?
Yes, Khan came over from the Flutter team and did a sort of a quick roundup talk on what was announced, and for those people that missed it, could ask questions in person, which is great. And then we had Rodrigo from Argentina. He came over. He's creator of GraphX, great package. He did a presentation on that, and we also had Joachim from VGV / open source Flame, come over and do a talk about open source stuff. So yeah, it was really good. Yeah, it was a good event. Yeah.
I had the privilege of having a GDSC event scheduled for the very next day, and part of it was Flutter past, present, and future. And so I got to take everything I had just seen the day before and try to turn it into like 6 of my middle slides. There's a recording out for it. I'll put it in the chat in a minute or two when I find it. But it really covered that. And I'm glad the timing worked out just right. So it was like the event has just happened. That's just fresh information. And a bunch of 40 students at UC Davis got to have sort of the first words out of my mouth about besides the event that we did the day before. So yeah, it was cool. Definitely cool.
So Mangirdas, you said there's are you going to do a Flutter Forward in Lithuania?
Yep.
Flutter Forward extended, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, extended. Yeah, it's actually the first in-person event because you know what happens when there's only a single organizer among the whole country. So usually I can only organize something when I have time. So yeah, the time has come. It will be the first in-person event. Actually, we tried to organize something during the autumn, but I got sick. Yeah, and just because of that, we postponed that. But happily, we postponed this to become a Flutter Forward extended, which is also kind of nice. Yeah, also, the community is growing, getting more and more requests or questions, what's happening there locally. So that would be like a 20 maximum person event. So that should be fun.
Talking about questions, I will say, yeah, people, get your questions in the chat. Get your questions there. Make sure you get a queue in front of them, and we'll get to them just after our brief introduction. I was privileged to get a chance to play around with the Impeller 3D Scene API recently, and I recreated what I was doing in my 3D engine in that. And I did my presentation Monday at Geekly's Flutter Global Summit on that. And it's interesting. It's interesting. The future looks bright in that case. I think that's it looks good. I can't wait.
I checked Impeller also. I mean, I tried to update my production app to Impeller, but I noticed some visual stuff that just didn't look right, so I reverted back.
Like what? Like what we're saying?
Mostly it was typography. It was just bolder, like more thick. It doesn't matter what font you choose. It was just very.
There was a bug with the anti-aliasing. I read that. I saw that ticket, and that was I believe it's been resolved now. So
yeah, maybe it's already fixed, but that's you take the app like side by side, and it's very noticeable. Right, you could notice that. But other than that, the animations, since in the app we are using some Rive animations and some native layers, so these are smooth. So recommended. Move forward. No pun intended.
Yeah, I think every time that's used, the pun was very much intended by them, at least.
Yeah,
that's a secret.
Did any of you guys take a look at the new roadmap that was released for 2023? We took a brief look at that last week. I'll post that in the chat for everyone. I don't think we need to go through it again now, but it was kind of interesting. Maybe we can go through it at the end of the show, but I put that in the live feed for anyone that wants to go check out the roadmap that they've announced for 2023. But yeah, it looking good. All right, let's see what questions we have in our queue. Let's see what questions we have.
Got a few already.
Yeah, cool. Let's get straight into it and see where we go. Do I try and pronounce the names? Amsanana.
Sakana.
Something.
Sakana.
That sounds right. That one is having a global class prompt to provide most used small widgets. A bad idea. Class text static. I'm going to say, why do you need a global class? So why not have loaded text top level? So you know, I get talking about namespace, but if you're going to suffix your variable name with text, you already know it's text. So why have text dot loaded text, right? You're just increasing your. I mean, there might be about namespacing, but I think global top level stuff is not as bad as it is in other languages because you can alias them, right? That's what I was going to say.
One thing I might say to this, though, when I first saw it, is, you're creating these widgets that are around all the time when you do it like that. I mean, they're constant, so they're there anyway. But I was wondering maybe if you wanted to come up with a common way to create your loading text, for example, you could create a builder for it, and then you can call that when you need it, and that way it's doing when you need it.
So I was going to say that the problem you've got with this specific instance, I'd say, is the fact that you're not going to be able to easily replace that with language variants, right? So you would have that problem. To be honest, I actually use global top level size boxes. I have a file which is like horizontal margin 8 equals size box width 8, and like that's a constant. And because it's used in every single layout everywhere, and I've got one instance of the same widget, there's no need to reconstruct that. You know, it's nice, sort of straightforward way of giving sort of a performance optimization to your layouts. Minor, but still something. But yeah, don't see a problem with it.
And I do assume that the example here with the text loading is going to have, if it was just text loading, it's just as easy to put text loading in there, constant text loading. But if it's got, so I'm presuming the actual real world example would be with maybe some styling. If it's not in your theme, you'd have some styling and stuff like that. So you might want to actually duplicate it to make sure it's the same. But I'd be careful.
I suppose another thing you could do here is just have a custom widget that is constant constructor that then does an inside its build method. It applies styles and does all the magic to make it,
I would prefer that.
And that would also let it be pluggable. So, for example, you might have a flag that either selects a bold or italic on top of the text.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah, I'd say, like, it's not necessarily a bad idea. I think just be careful what you do, right? Like,
sure.
Make sure.
Yep.
Well, and if I'm just stick one more time on this specific example. If you started off with a global class that just did the loading part with whatever styling you want, that would make it easier later on if you wanted to always change that to like an animated, like where it's like putting the dots out with an animation or something, because you've already isolated it out. It'd be easy to you change it one place, it changes it everywhere. So there are pluses to doing that kind of a I'm not sure it's worth it in this case, but definitely at times.
Yeah, I mean that is essentially the nature of having a class, right? That you can group your code together and have it in one place, so that you change it there, it changes everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Oh look, Craig says I add an extension methods to text that pre-fill my standard styles. I'm doing something like text.h1, really friendly.
Very
nice, interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, the other side of this is something else to think about, which I've also done in other projects, is to use the new theme extensions to provide sort of your own custom classes that have fields and values that make more sense in your theming of your application specifically. Anyway, right, we'll carry on with the questions. Roberto, are there any limit or on Riverpod how many providers you can have? I tend to split the providers into smaller ones. As far as I know, there's no limit.
How many names can you come up with?
I mean, there's always a limit. To be just pedantic about it, there's always a limit, and you're always going to be limited by the amount of memory on the device, right? Like that's just and power. At some point, you're going to have so many that the performance degrades, right?
Right.
But to be honest, it's like split them up. Don't split them up for the sake of splitting them up, is what I'd say, right? You're creating more lines of code, more unnecessary like boilerplate around managing data. Just tend to split them up where you need to, right? What makes more practical sense. It's like that there's this thing that you go through as a developer, and I'd kind of like everyone's opinion on this, but I think there's a period that you go through which is like as a beginner, you make things very rigid in the way that you could think about them. And then you get to sort of an intermediate developer, you're like, oh, I add a parameter for that because I might want to change it in the future. And I might do this because I might change in the future. Now I add a builder, which can add a factory method that does this and that. And before you know it, you've got this really complex thing. But you only ever use it for one purpose. And all that stuff, all those options and all those parameters never get used. And then you get to the kind of the upper level. You're like, no, you go kind of almost revert back to the beginning style of like, make what's necessary and then refactor it as required and expand on it as required as you need those use cases, right? And you realize that doing that work up front doesn't actually solve a lot of the use cases that you actually have. There's a certain amount of architecture that you do that you know you need those use cases, but you're doing it because you know you need them rather than because you might need them. And that's the tragedy of sort of a developer, that kind of, oh, I might do this in the future, I might use this, and that's one whole. What do you think about that, Danielle and Mangirdas?
Yeah, sure, of course. I've gone through that, and I've definitely over-engineered things up front at times, and more recently than I would probably like to admit on that. But there's a rule out there, that you do something at least 3 times before you go decide how you're going to want to optimize it, where you start fitting things in. And so by doing that, it helps you know what you need to change or not. And today it's easy enough to refactor. So if you need to add the font to make it bold instead of italic, the parameter for that, if you did it up front, you might say is bold, but it turns out you may also want to underline when it comes later and it needs to be an enum or something. So you're refactoring anyway. So definitely, if you wait until you actually have a need to do it, then you can, then you're in better shape. And by that standpoint, you can have 2 things that are similar, but they're not the same. At first, code them separately. You can always combine them once you really understand what's going on. You don't have to, try to make as few widgets as possible. I mean, it's, overall we want code that's readable and maintainable, and we don't. Again, I would say don't be afraid to. I would say write tests, so then you're not afraid to refactor, because if you have tests that back the stuff up, then you can refactor all day long, and you're fine. So I guess those.
I'm also a big fan of the rule of 3. That you kind of need 3 points to define a plane, and you cannot tell until you've done the 3rd thing which values are correlated and can be controlled by one knob, and which values keep going in different directions, which have to have 2 separate knobs. And that's an important distinction to understand as you start abstracting, is what things are correlated together, because you don't want separate knobs for things that are typically turned at the same time.
Yeah, actually, this use case rings 2 bells in my mind. So first one is when in the beginning of the project, we had a custom style guideline and custom components. And in Figma, it's very easy to generate those like different kinds of buttons, different of whatever. And then designer says, okay, it would be nice to have all of them in the app. And then I say, well, maybe it makes sense to only implement those that we'll be using, and later we'll see. 6 months forward, we are still not using like half of those components still. So that's one example why you shouldn't, implement everything that's possible and cover everything. The second was, I think, at a point when we were talking about Flutter app development, and the basics start implementing the authentication layer, and then there are discussions. Oh, we need to abstract everything to be prepared for all the possible providers. And then I just asked, how many times in your life you change the provider of your authentication in the app or whatnot. Just implement what's needed. Sometimes, a little bit of engineering is useful, because at least you can see how your project could grow at scale, but prepare for everything, not always the best idea.
Okay.
Cool.
All right. Next question, I guess. We're just going to plow through them. Keep your questions coming. Yep. Make sure you put a Q in front of them. Right. Now, this person's just taking a mickey. I can't pronounce that name. Does someone want to give it a go?
Too many consonants in a row.
Right. It's like Welsh. You just can't. No one can.
Right.
Right. Let's say, is there a way of creating multiple isolates for various tasks that also have control of the order in which they give their results back?
Oh, no.
So I will say that sorry, I will say that you can create multiple isolates for various tasks. That's exactly their main purpose, right? Like you can create an isolate for whatever you want. Having the control of the order in which they give results back, not so much. However, you can do a demuxer would be the term that I would use, but basically demultiplexing it. So you're taking all those results and you're basically waiting for all the slots to be filled, and then you're giving those results back. So you're basically ordering the results as they come back. And that's again just about sort of abstracting away your management of those isolates, so that you give it set tasks or whatever it is, and they come back in the order in which you gave them. Right? Like you could do that. You could just assign each one a number, and then progressively, if the early number hasn't turned up yet as a result, then you wait for it, and then they just go out in order, basically. But you can do that. There's no reason why you can't.
On the most primitive level, that would be doing a class future dot wait, where you basically can hand it a bunch of futures, and you won't proceed until all of them have completed or thrown errors.
There's lots of ways of doing these things.
Yeah, but that's just one. That's the really simple
yeah,
way.
the easiest way of doing that, is saying like, the result, give a number to each as a parameter to each of your isolates, and have it return that number in the result. That lets you order them, and then you just do future.wait all, and then sort the result based on that number. Then they'll be in the order in which you gave them.
I've used the technique that I stole from the old Apache code, where Apache has a scoreboard, essentially, where each individual process can register what it's doing right now. And so I've had this scoreboard set up, and then I use pipelines of .then in futures to move forward and notify as we're progressing through stages, to able to watch a whole bunch of processes in parallel go through their various steps. And it's a lot of fun if you want to plug all that together. But I got the idea from Apache, so from many years ago.
Another idea that struck me when you just said that was that you could take the isolates are futures, right? The result is normally a future. If you use like the new isolate.run or compute in Flutter, then you're going to get a future back. In which case you could actually like use RxDart and like use the facilities on there, which is like latest stream, and just do stream.of the future result. I think you can do something like that, or do as stream on a future, and you'll get, once it completes, it sends the result back and closes the stream, and then you can just use like latest stream of and just combine them all together.
Right.
But there's ways of doing it. Yeah. All right.
Yes.
We'll move on.
Sure.
Question for you, Danielle. I'll read it and you can answer it. Danielle, thanks for the Flutter Forward web performance tips. How long have you been working on Flutter Web, and are you excited for the WebAssembly enhancements? Tell us.
Sure, absolutely. Well, first off, you're very welcome. It was something I was needing to learn, so that was very useful for me too. So thank you very much. Thank you for watching it. I've been working on Flutter Web specifically for about a year and a half now. Doing several different projects with it. And I'm excited about the WebAssembly enhancements. I'm excited to see what they can do to keep shrinking, whatever they need to on, for what we have to load up with stuff anyway to help make that better. But I really think out of the web stuff, it was the elements. I'm drawing a blank on what they called them, but where you can put an element inside of a page, a Flutter element inside of a page. Embedded elements, duh.
iframe, embedded elements, okay.
Embedded elements, yeah. So I thought that was actually something that looks very interesting to me, and being able to, with possibilities, I think for, like we have to send emails out to our clients to, with a link to our app, and it seems like maybe I could do something inside of that, possibly, with an embedded element once those come out. So I think there's all kinds of possibilities there. So that's actually what excited me the most on the Flutter Web stuff they talked about there.
Sending the whole app as an email sounds like a really interesting idea.
Right? I don't know how it'll work or not, but hey, it might be fun.
I was just trying to look at you guys' videos. So here you go. So post in the chat. This is for later. Don't go to it right now. But this is the video that Danielle was talking about, and Eli. And also, Mangirdas, you've got a video as well from Flutter Forward. So I posted that in the chat. Controlling your Flutter app on the fly with Firebase remote config.
Right.
Yeah, cool.
Good stuff.
So yeah, check those out. The Flutter team posted recently posted a tweet about the on-demand content, because there's a lot of more content that I think a lot of people didn't see. So they looked at the keynote and didn't really see all this content from around the community that was posted, particularly around the event. So check it out. Yeah,
some awesome stuff. Yes, definitely.
I still haven't watched all of it, but I'm working on it.
All right, next question. Is there any way to call a Flutter module from Kotlin code and return a value from that Flutter module to Kotlin side? I'm going to I'm going to ask a question back and say, do you mean Dart or do you mean Flutter? So in short, you can do both, right? But the sounds of it, you just maybe run some code, call a Flutter module from Kotlin code and return a value from that Flutter module. So it seems to me like the question is like, do you try and launch a screen that actually has a Flutter UI and then get result back? In which case, sure, you can do that. In which case, it's just embedded. It's called add to app. You just go look up the add to app stuff. And part of add to app is also to start up the Dart runtime environment, in which case you can run normal Dart code and also call a function and return a result. And that's also possible. A little bit more complicated, but you can do it.
I haven't thought about add to app in a long time.
I know it's. I just haven't had a need for it, to be honest. It's there for there's definitely a purpose for it. I'm kind of curious what Hashan's use case is here. If maybe you've got an existing Android Kotlin based app and you're trying to add Flutter screen or fragment / activity or something to it, or if it's kind of conversely the other way around, right? I don't know. It's I don't know. Hit us up. Let's see. Yeah. All right, let's move on. Okay, go on, Jordan. Does someone else want to start taking these questions? Well, I'm going to start answering every single one. I know. It's terrible. Randall, do you want to ask the question?
I'll ask the question from somebody that starts with an A. Is having a single global state per module, auth module, checkout module, in a block a bad idea? If so, why? Is it easy to send events and listen to state? Oh, it is easy. Can states have view models? There's so much that I wouldn't do that's in this statement, but it's because I'm very opinionated about block versus riverpod that I'm just not going to answer this question. So somebody else is going to take it.
I mean, let's break. Is having a single global state per module?
I don't know what module is.
Block. Yeah. So this one's going to say. So normally there is some. So normally across an application like auth is a global state, right? Like there's no. Yeah. It's very rare that an application you can log into multiple times and have auth as a non-global thing. The same goes maybe for checkout, like having maybe you've got a shop thing and you've got a shopping cart that's consistent across all your screens of your application. Maybe that's more sort of a global state. In which case, sure, you would have a global state per module in that case. In block, I mean, a block is it's just a way of holding state. Sure, you can do that.
Yep.
I may have read this the first time because I was reading this. I was reading this like having one big state with different modules, but maybe
I got the same Redux flashbacks as well.
Because what I would say about that is the more you combine, more disparate things you combine together, the harder it is going to be to maintain, especially if you ever have multiple employees working on it, things like that. So from that standpoint, this is agnostic to block. This is just in general. The more stuff you tightly couple together by putting them in the same file, same place, the harder it is for multiple people to work on them. So I think that from a practical standpoint, it's better to have, in general, unless there's reasons not to, it's better to have smaller, tighter things that can be worked on together, so that we can, so that you know what you're doing. It's object-oriented programming to a certain extent.
Yeah. Also, by having a single state, like if you have a really huge one, then you need to put a significant amount of effort to make sure that you are rebuilding what's needed when a single property changes there. Because if you have a single piece of, I don't know, 100 properties or something like that, meaning a single change will rebuild your whole app or whatnot. So
you can, there is also, I will mention that on that point, there's also let's not forget selects, right? So,
but you need to put effort, to remember to
right?
put
I'm just
those
saying
in.
that is specifically to kind of solve that problem you have.
Yeah, for
You
sure.
want to rebuild a widget maybe on a certain individual property or group of properties rather than the entire object change, and that kind of lets you do that.
And I have some problems the way we do state management a lot, where it's very much global, and that just seems to go against object-oriented principles to me, where you should have access to the information you need and not everything. And so by yes, we don't. I mean, do we need to protect ourselves from ourselves? Maybe not, but very smart people have come up with this stuff. So that's the other thing I don't like about it, is the fact that now I've got access to information that doesn't concern me, which could open up to someone else coming in, not understanding things, abusing stuff, whatever. So that in general, I have a problem with how we do state a lot because of that.
I mean, it just depends on how you do it, right? Like the thing is, like most of these state management techniques, they can all be misused, right? And I'm just going to chuck everything in one model object and chuck that at the top level and just have one big global state for everything. And it's like, problems will occur if that you do that kind of thing. So.
Remy actually has the strategy about using Riverpod, Remy being the author of Riverpod, of actually having his Riverpod stack be right next to the view that uses it. So in one file, he'll have the view, that's a widget or two, and the provider and the notifier, and then any data model that it might need to hold, all in one file, because it says that's the editing cycle you typically go through, is for up and down that stack. So why not have all that in one file? And that way you're completely separated from touching other people's app state, because it's over in another file, and now all of a sudden you'll have to include something else to be able to get to that other app state somewhere else that's on a similar stack but different names. So that's his strategy.
And Simon, I don't know if you can pull up the bottom comment there, but Robert has got a tip also he's giving on that.
Yeah.
It's close.
Which one was that? Tip. I see tip.
Yep.
Yeah, I think so. So he's suggesting that we should try to reduce state as much as possible and use server state when possible. In other words, don't store local states when they're not needed. And
True.
I mean, that's how my app works. I don't have any kind of local storage. I store it all on the back end.
It's quite funny. We talk about state, right? And state is just variables. It's just And I think I just want to be clear that we're not talking about state as in the state object from a stateful widget, right? We're talking state as a general term in terms of holding the state of your application as in the variables and the content that define its condition. Yeah.
No.
Robert continues.
No, he's making a joke there.
Yeah.
Maybe. I know him. He might not be making a joke.
All right. Let's
continue on.
Yeah. I feel like have we missed? Have we doing? I swear I thought I just missed something in the chat. I don't know. Can't be that important if I can't see it anymore. So let's move on. Next question.
Yeah.
Myla, as a Flutter developer, how important is it to know native Android/iOS development? I let the guess.
If you work for me, working on Flutter Web, it wouldn't be important at all.
Yeah.
That's actually a pretty flippant answer. It's not really true. I mean, since we're creating apps, the mobile, have really kind of done a lot of work on designing apps. So that doesn't mean you need to know native Android or iOS development, but I think concepts and apps still matter overall. Yeah. So I would say those are important. And the other thing I would say is, while it's not exactly native development, deploying to the app stores is pretty specific on the two things, and that takes some work to learn.
I was going to say, there's also, I think, integrating. I'd say you should learn how to integrate Flutter with the platform. So you don't need to know anything about Android and iOS development specifically, but how Flutter can integrate with those, so that if you do need to reach into the platforms to do something specific, you can. I'll just give you I mean, for instance, there's like on the other day on web, it was like, oh, I need to access the permissions of the browser, and that's something that I think the permission handler doesn't do that, like the usual plugin that I would normally do. So I was like, okay, I need to go look at the browser documentation. How do I do that? What's it called? How does it function? You know, this is all stuff that you have to look into specific for that one use case. And it's the same thing, like knowing how to access, in this case in Flutter Web, the browser, and doing like conditional imports is quite an important thing for web versus, you know, Android and iOS. Knowing how to do method channels would be important.
And I don't know much about native development. I didn't come up through that. I went directly into Flutter, and I never experienced the pain that most of you have gone through before finding Flutter. I luckily passed all that. But there are two important things you will run into as you're doing development for iOS and Android, even if you don't understand how they work natively. The two pain points are pod files and what's the other one? The build system. Gradle. Yeah. You have to understand how to Google for answers for those. That's really all you need to know, because no matter what you see, somebody else has had exactly the same thing happen to them. And you just have to find the right Stack Overflow answer that says, do this. And then it just works again. So I think 9 times out of 10, that'll be right.
And those are the Stack Overflow answers that won't have Randall's name on them, right?
Yeah, they won't. Yeah. I won't have answered those. I will not. I might comment on them, but I won't answer them. No.
I'm just thinking about that. It's like that the whole. It's always the build system. Always the pain point is the build system. I mean, that's always been the same. I think for all. I just realized thinking about it, like all the C++ stuff, all the programming stuff I've ever had. The biggest pain point is the build system and dependencies and so on. I can't. I think there's the ultimate yak shape, because every so often there's a new system, there's a new tool, there's something that's going to solve all these problems, and every single time it devolves into the same issues.
And written in a different language, a different language than you're using. So, like all the Ruby stuff to build, Xcode stuff. It's just like silly. It's like Ruby. Now I got to know Ruby just to be able to have my build system work. It's like, what?
That's it. That's what we want. That's what we want, Dart team. A build system in Dart.
Yes. Top to bottom.
You shall not pass.
Yes, right. We'll do it with macros. We'll do it with macros.
Right. Oh, see, static meta program. That's the future. Build systems in Dart. Right. Oh God, no. Right. Let's move on. Mohammed says, "What's Jasper Dart? Is it better than Flutter for web?" So Jasper is a package written in Dart. So to be clear, this unrelated to these two things. Dart was made for the web. That is where it first started its life. And it's always been able to modify the DOM and to do all these things. You've always been able to like add div tags and change CSS styles and do all that kind of fun stuff. It's always been in there. It's the Dart HTML package is there. And you can just build a web app with Dart. So basically Dart replaces JavaScript, and you can just do Dart, HTML, CSS, and that's it. And you can just replace and do that, right? But the problem here is you now have to do CSS layouts. You now have to understand the DOM. You have to understand HTML. These are more systems. So the idea of Flutter Web is that you can take your existing Flutter application and just run it on the web. And that has certain limitations that come from that, right? Like, as we say, it's for web apps, not websites, because the idea is that it paints it all itself. It's its own system, which means it doesn't necessarily play well with things that require HTML and CSS, right? Because it doesn't directly use those, right? So that's where just sort of Jasper comes in. So Jasper is better placed for building sites and things like that, things that require HTML and CSS. So that's kind of like the SEO problem, right? Like basically the idea that, your web page doesn't have the text like in it natively, so therefore the browser doesn't render the text, so therefore SEOs can't find it. This problem X, Y, Z. So anyway, bigger. I think that's my answer. I can't remember where I started, but Jasper is good for building websites and web apps in Dart, and not requiring Flutter, basically.
Jasper would be sort of the same general space that Angular Dart still has, although Angular Dart is sort of AngularDart is still getting development, but it's by the community, so it's moving slow and forward. Except I had an enthusiastic conversation the other day with the head honcho on that. I forget his name. Sorry. And he says, no, we're absolutely committed to making sure all the documents are fleshed out and making sure that it's a workable system. And we're trying to build a community around this to really make it move forward. So that would be an alternative to Jasper. So Jasper fits in that same category in that you're taking Dart code and spitting it out. The difference would be that AngularDart is more Dart embedded inside HTML, where Jasper is just straight Dart editing, straight Dart coding that looks a lot like Flutter widgets in terms of what you type in your program.
So here's an example of that. So you use these things called components instead of widgets. DOM component, header 1, text, and there it is. And this is actually a H1 tag. If you inspect this in the browser, you'll see that it's a H1 tag inside the body, right? Like that, it's exactly that. And if I just briefly, like you can load up sample, anyone can play around with this, but here's like weather API, and here's an example of, you get a stateful component, a state, just like Flutter. It kind of has that same feel. We've got API here, which is just Dart code with futures and all the usual stuff. And then the end result is that you're making your widgets out of these components, like here, div, weather, image, tag, so on and so forth. That displays this thing on the right, and then the CSS lays all that out and styles it all and positions it all appropriately. So now we can type in, I don't know, Florida. Yeah. Will that find anything? There you go. Oh, that's found something in Colombia, but whatever. Yeah, close enough. Florida Blanca in Colombia. Yeah. But you get the idea. So yeah, you should have a play around that if you're interested in the kind of web aspect. But yeah, there's just a different way of doing things for web. All right, moving on. In a Flutter app, by default, we get an app delegate on the iOS side, but we don't get an extension of application on the Android side. How can I add it? I need app, not activity lifecycle. I'm kind of curious. So first of all, it does have one by default. It is there. It uses the default Android one, so you don't need to give it a name specifically. The other side of this is you can just add just make your own class that extends application. You just open up your Android folder in Android Studio, add a class, Java/Kotlin class, whatever you're building in, that extends application, then just put that in your manifest. This is how you just normally do it normally in any Android application. And then there's nothing particular you have to do, as far as I remember. I think they kind of solved the whole application lifecycle thing. I'm kind of curious though, that why you can always access the application lifecycle using the what are they called? Architecture components now. That's the kind of more common way of doing lifecycle rather than overrun the application. But if you want to, you can just do that. There's no harm. The documentation that you might want to look at, which I just bring up the stream here since we're here, is on what is it? api.flutter.dev/javadoc. This is linked to the main website, but this has all the native classes in it. I seem to remember that there is I think it's actually gone now. There used to be like a Flutter, is it Flutter application? Yeah, Flutter application. There you go. So you can extend that. I don't think it's required anymore. I think it might be deprecated. When using an application, it's not required when using API packages on this, since they're self-initialized on first use. There you go. So yeah, you could just be able to extend the normal app application yourself, and there's no specifics you need to do to make it all work. Hopefully that helps. Sorry, I think we got bumped up there. Hopefully you saw that, but yeah, it's this. I'll post the link in the chat. Right. Yeah. Okay. Next question, I guess. I promise I won't try and answer everyone. Right. Are there stateful widgets less performant than are stateful widgets less performant than stateless ones? Is it bad practice to have stateful widgets for every screen? No, it's
I don't know how this keeps coming up. This is something that gets repeated over and over again on Discord. And then I traced it down once. I actually saw, oh boy, do I even mention that package? The package we love to not talk about.
Yeah.
The author of that said this in the documentation for that package. And that's why people keep talking about it.
It's not bad practice to have stateful widgets for every screen.
Yeah.
There you go.
Just
the
you
answer.
don't need that usually. And that's it.
In the case they don't need to be stateful, though, I mean, you probably should know whether you need to.
Basically,
yeah, if you've got a static screen that doesn't need to be stateful, you know.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm gonna also caveat this with another point that people forget. A stateless widget with all of its children as not necessarily stateless, but with large build methods, then when that widget needs to be built as a stateless widget might need to be built more than a stateful widget, then in that situation, it's going to build everything inside. So it's more about you breaking up your widgets into more modular units than having sort of one massive layout. Right. But your performance is going to come from breaking up widgets and not using functions that return widgets, right? Honestly, like, put it this way, there's no, obviously don't have a stateful widget if you don't have anything to store in your state, but if you need to use state for something like, say, like hooking up with like one of the observers or doing some sort of other pattern that requires you to know when your init state and your dispose state, then that's what you do. It literally makes no difference in performance. No difference. You're going to have to do it anyway, so that's the way you do it. I don't want to say. Yeah. Go for it. Do it. Cool. It's fine. Okay, question. DDD, domain-driven development. Entities are mutable and overridden. Equals returns true when ID match. This hence does not publish states in block. What's the solution? Override them. Implement your own.
I think.
Well, I mean, it says a DDD entity, so I'm assuming that maybe it's code generated then because they're saying that it's already mutable. I mean, the fact of the matter is, I mean, yeah. The problem here is that you've got these entities that are mutable, which means when they change, the override equals returns true when the ID match.
I have a sense here. I have a sense of what they're doing. The thing is that block has the specific notion that it will never send two equal events adjacent. Yeah. It demuxes those, right? It dedupes those. Now, the problem with that is sometimes people are counting on the event happening regardless of what it contains. And that's backwards from block. So, of course, there would end up problems. So the answer is either buy into the block philosophy and count those as the same event, and therefore you can't send it twice in a row, or put something in your object that equals says those are no longer equals. So that's really the two strategies. Really, that's the only way you can do that. So you're trying to swim upstream with block. Not, oh boy, that's just horrible mixed metaphor there. But you're trying to swim upstream, and don't do that. But if you're going to buy into block, do it the block way, including that it dedupes adjacent events that are equal.
Yeah. And just override, as I said, override the equals. And if you're going to override equals, also override hash code.
Yes.
Right. So those, you have to override both. But yeah, just do that. Danielle, I don't know if you know, but there's a bird on your head.
She's muted too. Look at that.
I did keep myself muted because sometimes he's not quiet too. So.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I try to be around when I can provide something. But yes, that's Dorian. Everybody, Dorian Gray.
Is a bird on the head worth two in the lap or something? I don't understand the metaphor. Yeah. All right.
All right, and we have another guest joining us a bit later than the start of the program. Sarah, welcome.
Hello, long time
Sarah.
no see. Randall, I'm so glad to see you.
Yeah,
Hey.
well, it's good to be opaque. Yes, it's very good.
Yes. How do you do that? I was thinking my office is so messy. I want to hide it, but yeah, that's
Oh, we have technology.
Practice makes perfect.
settings.
No,
There's a settings button.
you have to.
Sarah.
You have to.
there probably is. I just didn't explore. But now you can see my my bookshelf, which is very exciting. So, how is everyone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bird answered.
Bird answered. It's awesome, apparently.
Yeah,
Dorian's
right.
great. All
It
right.
just
You were
tweeted.
answering questions.
It
So.
it tweeted just now. Yes,
Yeah.
right.
Or did it toot? Or did it toot on?
Maybe it tooted.
No, no.
Maybe it tooted
Yeah.
or tweeted. All right, one of those.
And I'm going to mention that. So
I
get your questions
I
in.
think this is my cue. I'm going to hop off screen. So
It's
Ray, for having me.
time.
I'll stick around in case I can answer anything. I'll come back on. But
Thanks,
Okay.
Danielle.
All right. Thanks,
Okay.
Danielle.
All right,
Bye.
there we go.
Let's see. I'm going to say get your questions in now because
Yes.
we're gonna try and end a bit earlier today than the usual. Too long. So
2.5, 3 hours. 3 hours.
Yeah, we're not
we've
going
done
to do
recently.
that. So
Yes,
get your
no.
cues in the chat. And we'll get... All right.
Yep.
Let's go. Let's get to the next one. We've got a little stack of things here. So,
Okay.
do you have any project that start developer doing of game editor on top of Flutter? Do you have any?
Actually, wait, Simon, before you finish reading this, are we going to let Sarah introduce herself?
Oh, sorry, Sarah. Yes, introduce yourself, please.
Okay. Hi, new viewers. I, a long time ago, was a Flutterista, and then I helped with the Google DevRel team for a year, and then I had a baby, and I am now like reactivating my presence in the community after kind of a hiatus because, babies. So I don't feel comfortable answering technical questions right now, if I'm honest, because there's like so much stuff that's happened. It goes so fast. But I am here to provide support and, I don't know, show my face and be like, I'm back.
Well, welcome back.
What was it? Was it the door? I'm back.
I'm back. Yeah. So I don't know. Once upon a time, I was pretty good at Flutter, and now I'm not. And I hope to come back to that point. So
Practice.
Well, if you have any questions, we can tell you where to go ask those questions.
yes, indeed.
Like right over there. Right.
All right.
I think
I'm going to say make sure you put a Q in the front of it though.
Oh yeah. Make sure.
Don't forget the Q. Yes. That's a Randall instruction. Yes.
Let's go crack on here. So do you have any project that start development of a game editor on top of Flutter?
I'm not sure what the game editor is. Actually.
So
Yeah.
well, I mean, like Flame's a game editor / engine on top of Flutter. So maybe that what you're asking. That's the one I would direct you to if you're talking about game engines and making games with Flutter. Because I mean, as we said, like from the very, Flame, the Flame engine has had some really good success. Let me just pop a link in the chat for everyone. If people don't know what we're talking about, it's this. It's called there we go. It's called Flame. 2D game engine built on top of Flutter. There you go. So just fire it up and away you go and read the docs, I guess. The opens. Go on.
I just wanted to add something because there's like different kinds of games and there's different resources for game development, right? So Flame is really good for like 3D and graphics intensive kind of games, I think. Is that fair?
2D.
2D. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, I haven't actually used it, but it's good for graphics. And then there's a game SDK that's put out that's good for more like puzzle games, which I think
I'd say you use both, right? So the game you're talking about the game toolkit from the Flutter team, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that toolkit is definitely something you should use. That's more about integrating with the platform. So that shows you how to integrate with like the leaderboards, with the Play Store leaderboards, and doing all that kind of stuff. It's not really a game engine in itself. It's more about the toolkit on how you start building a game with Flutter, right? But the actual engine, the bit that actually does the rendering, the actual functioning of the game, that would be probably Flame. Or you can just use widgets, right? You can just use anything you like. So
Yeah.
essentially, like the idea is that, you know, widgets are sort of designed mainly for app level components, like building your UI for apps, not necessarily for games. However, you can use them for building games. Like you can have a widget for like a spaceship and a widget for the asteroids, and you can do all that kind of rotations and fun stuff. But yeah, if you want to get kind of more of a game aspect and use collision detection and all these kind of like more advanced sort of techniques, then that's where sort of Flame comes in.
Right. So I should stop answering technical questions because that was just bad. I just wanted to point out the toolkit existed, and
no, I completely forgot. So no, that's awesome. Yeah. There's also, I mean, again, so just to be clear, there is also Unity, a Unity 3D plugin for Flutter, so you can build 3D games in Unity and then have them work in Flutter as a UI for your game, and then you can also integrate that with the UI toolkit for your leaderboards. There's all sorts of options. The world is your oyster.
So some shortcuts, like there are even toolkits, or I would say frameworks built on top of Flame, like Bonfire, which is framework built for RPG games, which is just lets you know makes it easier to build such games. So these things exist. Just search through the pub dev, you'll be surprised.
How's it go? Is turtles all the way down? Something like that. Is it good to show dialogues using global context from navigator key? Don't do that. I mean, it's not necessarily a problem, right? But the problem is, how do you know your navigator key is actually attached to the UI, right? Like, I don't know. What you're doing is kind of escaping from the standard flow. There's actually a lint check now on using asynchronous, you know, doing things after an asynchronous period, and it's kind of the same thing. Like accessing I mean, you can now check if a context is mounted, so it's not too much of a bad problem now. But yeah, the kind of doing that has a bad code smell. I'd say personally, it functions, it works, but you kind of now tie all your places where you're trying to show dialogues to having that navigator key in a global state. It's just not very nice. You could, what you can do is just if you've got like some sort of, I mean, I would sort of hesitate and say, where are you trying to show dialogue that isn't from user interaction? Because if you're showing a dialogue from user interaction, you have the context. So use that context. Right? Am I missing something? What would you guys add to that?
Maybe there are some, asynchronous scenarios when you get an event from.
Yeah, but that's really bad UX. Like popping something up in front of the user after like 10 seconds after like they've actually done some action. It's just like, ugh. Really, really bad. Like it's been like there was the thing that I've seen before where like, user presses on like, let's say we got a text chat app, right? Like you type in text and you hit send and it sends it to the chat. Now they press the send button and then it turns into a little spinning waiting thing because of a slow connection and it has to, take some time to send. Then they hit back and go to a different conversation. And then maybe they get a notification about it could not send. And you're like, but I haven't typed in this conversation yet. And they get this notification in front of them from the previous conversation they were in. So in that situation, it should have disconnected the fact that they were doing this asynchronous event from the UX, right? So again, it's more about at that point, you check to see if your widget's still mounted. That's one way, a quick sort of shortcut way of doing it. Or effectively, you should have proper state management, have sort of like events and state, and therefore you can fire off an event saying something's failed, and it's sort of it checks against its conversation if it's for the same conversation you're looking at right now or something, right? You can kind of do that kind of thing. But yeah, having a global context is not like context is that it's context where you are. Global context has a bad feel to it for sure. Like having a global navigator key also has a bad sort of feel to it. Yeah. Anyway, anyone want to add to that before? Sorry, I've run on a little bit of a rant.
No, I only thought of there's like I wanted to say recently, but it wasn't that recent. Like when the Flutter team introduced the scaffold messenger, like to showing snack bars, because that's also kind of using the global keys, but at least that's a scaffold key. And even that's in documentation to use it globally. But it's a different thing. I think rather than showing models or dialogues.
Yeah, I think the notion of that is the actual scaffold key should be held within the state of the widgets, right? It's part of the UI. It's not
that's also
state.
true.
There's always this question that comes up, especially around Riverpod. In fact, we actually had somebody have a question later. I can't find it right now, but what do I do in Riverpod to pop up an error for the user? And I'm going, no, you don't. That's at the wrong level. You're in model and controller territory there. You're not in the view area. If you don't have a context right there in front of you, you shouldn't be sending anything to the screen. That's really like the ultimate test. The context of the software is the human context. It's that I kind of know what's going on because that's all the stuff that's on the screen.
I'd add to that and say that most people forget the power of closure. That is, passing an anonymous function with parameters to your backend, right? So basically, what you're doing is you have inside the. Let's say you say I take that example of a conversation earlier. You press the send button. It can send along with the message a function to run once it completes successfully, right? Which displays "Thank you for sending your message." This is really bad UX, but you get my idea. And inside that, it has access, because it's a closure, it's generated as an anonymous thing. It has access to the variables in its scope, which means it has access to the context, which was available to it. And inside that function, you say, if context.mounted, right? And it tells you if that context is still part of the view hierarchy. And if it is, then you say context.provider of and get the thing and show the thing on the screen, whatever it is, your styles, your theme. And you can do all that kind of fun stuff, right? And that's kind of how you normally handle that kind of after something is noise. After it was actually added, I can't remember, it was added 3.7, was it? I can't remember, it was added recently.
It's new in 3.7. Yeah.
It was one of those things where you'd always have to have a state. I so many times I've put a stateful widget just to get that mounted flag, just to know that, and they've now added that to the context, which makes more sense. I like that more.
Yeah.
That makes practically more sense. All right, let's carry on. I think we're going to draw a line in the questions. So if your question isn't in now, that's it. It's not going in the queue. You're going to have to wait until next week. Otherwise, we're not going to get through everything, I don't think.
167 hours from now. Everybody come back. 167 hours.
Right.
Put it on your write an app that measures hours.
I'm just imagining someone doing that, like that reminder to their, like, Siri, remind me 167 hours to. All right, let's carry on. David says, is in a deeply nested tree, is widget lookup expensive? Relating to performance, like looking up a provider or an inherited widget. Okay, so let me just briefly cover what actually happens, right? So you're somewhere in the hierarchy, you're in a widget really, really deep down the hierarchy. It's a bit of text somewhere and whatever. Now, it goes up to its parent, and that parent might be like a stateful widget that has lots of other widgets in it. So it goes up each one of those widgets, up the tree of connected widgets. This is the element hierarchy. Actually, there's three hierarchies. You can go three trees, sorry, and you go look this one up. But anyway, it goes up the trees and it goes up and up and up and up and up until it gets to the root level and it doesn't find something, or until it gets the widget that it's looking for, like the state of a provider, and goes and does the lookup in provider to get whatever thing you're looking for. Now that may be 100 checks, but it's all done in a very tight loop, right? And it's done very quickly. Like 100 checks is nothing in comparison to like today's modern hardware, right? But doing that at 60 FPS every frame on multiple widgets, it all adds up. So that's where inherited widget comes in. And also provider uses inherited widget under the hood. So there's no or here. It's the same for both. And most state management uses inherited widget under the hood, which basically means it caches the widget that it found, so that it only has to go up the tree once. And the next time that same widget needs to go get that value, it already has it as a reference dependency. And that's where did change dependencies gets called, because if one of those references changes, did change dependencies called, and it rebuilds the widget. So the principle here is, yes, it is expensive, but it's only expensive once, right? And therefore, is it then expensive, right? Like expensive is it's a relative term, right? In terms of, it's expensive compared to not doing anything, but then it's not expensive overall, right? Does that answer? I don't know. Is there anything else to add to that?
It's as fast as it can be. I tell you, these guys have worked really, really, really hard to make this whole thing as performant as possible. So take the energy you need, burn it, but don't waste it. But really do it straightforwardly, and you'll probably get in there okay. So
it reminds me of what Remy and Thomas Burkhart were doing with the notifications on the standard listenable interface. They performance enhanced it. So the community actually been doing this, right? They did some performance checks. And they realized, if you like pre-allocate a list and use I can't remember what it was, like some certain type of list, then it makes it that bit more faster and on 10,000 million requests or something. So it's like, I'm not degrading what they're saying, but what I'm trying to get is it's that kind of thing that you need to do performance at, because it all adds up, right? Before you realize it, you've got hundreds and thousands of instances of widgets in your application, right? And some of those are all on the screen at once, and just it does add up to a lot. I said don't do pre-optimization, right? Don't go searching for ways of performance optimizing your app before you find there's a performance problem, right?
right.
Build your app, make it work, and then start thinking about ways that or refactor as you go, and just think about ways that you can actually do it. But build it first, right? Don't pre-optimize. It's the root of all evil, I'm telling you.
And Sarah has an announcement before we continue.
Oh, go for it. Sorry, Sarah. You're on mute. Are you on mute? You're on mute.
It's been a while. Okay. If I'm honest, I was bad about this before too. Yes. So I want to tell you that there's a Flutterista conference this year. Hooray! Hooray! So I don't know if there's any Flutteristas watching, but now you know, and we're going to talk more about it at the next general meeting. And for everyone else, we hope that you join us. We don't have an exact date scheduled yet, but it's going to be sometime in the fall, August or September. And it will be mostly online. It'll be streamed and everything, but we will hopefully have a city, and then the people that are near the city can come to wherever we are. So it's very exciting, and I'm looking forward to making that happen. And
the last one was wonderful, so looking forward to the next one.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes.
Yeah.
And so I guess this might be a good point to segue. I do currently suck at technical questions, but if you have any community questions, I'm probably still useful at that. So
go.
Just putting it out there. So that's it. I'm looking forward to it, and I will probably have more details in a few weeks, and then we'll make more announcements.
Come on the show and do an announcement for sure.
Yeah.
You're welcome on anytime.
Cool.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay. I'm going to let you technical boys get back to it and eat.
Actually, before we get on to another question, I did notice actually, John here said, yeah, sometimes light on CPU means expensive on RAM, and there's always a trade-off. There's like a little was it time, money, whatever it is, like that kind of triangle, right? Where you can only have
money,
one
RAM,
whatever
time,
it is.
money, RAM.
It's like CPU RAM is that you can have your problem could be more expensive on the memory, but then make it more
right
on the CPU and vice versa, right? Like
yes. Fast, cheap, correct. That one. Yeah, you can't
choose two. You can't have all three, right?
Right.
Hey everyone. Hey Randall. Mostly asked in Flutter about using it for the web. What would you suggest after so many improvements coming in?
Flutter.
Mostly asked about Flutter, about
Flutter.
using it for the web. Would you? What would you? So you've used Flutter for web mostly. What would you suggest to do next after so many improvements coming? Honestly, just pick one, right? Like.
Yeah, I don't get.
As in, like, what would be what would? Okay, so my view on this is basically saying that they've mostly asked in Flutter. Mostly, I think, asked in Flutter about using it for web. So they're mostly using it for web. But what would they suggest to try next after so many improvements to Flutter have come in?
Maybe.
Is there a particular thing in Flutter they should try next? Basically, I don't think there's anything. I can't think of one particular thing. However, I would say what everyone should be doing on this is, because it's cross-platform, try Flutter on every platform, right? Try building your app for Windows. If you've got a Windows machine, try it for Mac, try it for iOS, try it for, web, try it for whatever, right? Like get that under your belt so you can understand what the process involved in doing that, and what you might have installed to make it work on those particular platforms.
And I jumped back in because it's Flutter Web. So sorry for barging back in, make everybody smaller here. But anyway, I wanted to say what I would suggest is upgrade. And if you've got the time to do it, actually play around with the branches other than stable, and try out the new things, and then see where that inspires you to go. Some of the stuff is just improvements with what we've got. So that's actually really good. And you'll see that by upgrading it and trying it out, stuff like that. But then also the new things like the embedded elements we talked about, or things like that, we can that's something that it's a great time to play with it, and start trying it out and seeing what you can see with it. I mean, embedded elements, for example, may be a solution to a lot of people's SEO problems, as an example. It requires you knowing a little bit more of the HTML, CSS stuff than you probably want to, but that kind of stuff is a possibility too. So that would be my big thing, is go ahead and try it out. And Dorian, I'm gonna mute myself and hop back off. And thanks everybody. Sorry about this.
It's okay.
Dorian likes the sound of your voice. That's what it is.
Apparently.
All right, Reba asks, I use infinite scroll pagination package for infinite scroll, but I cannot use paging controller in provider for multiple widgets, like overview details page. Do you have any experience? I'm not getting the question here. I use infinite scroll pagination package for infinite scroll. Cool. But I cannot use the paging controller in provider for multiple widgets. I think, I don't quite, normally, I think I kind of understand what's going on here. Normally a controller is linked, especially a scrolling controller, is linked to one widget at a time, and going to be active for one widget at a time. It's contrary to the fact that a controller can have multiple scroll positions. The reason for that is because it can be attached to one scroll controller during the build and be detached from another during the build. So in which case there's two different scroll positions at one time. But effectively, when the scroll controller is active, it only ever has one scrolling view attached to it. And it is a bug to have multiple widgets somehow connected to the same scroll controller. Apart from nested scroll controller, but that's a completely different thing. Anyway, if you're trying to put like your page controller in your global state as part of a provider and using multiple widgets, that's not going to work. Just create a paging controller on each screen, right? Like, am I missing something here?
No, I don't think so. I also noticed like a bug that could be kind of obvious. It's like I saw some people were using the same scroll controller on tab views for a reason, and then they thought that the previous tab was disposed and this controller should be free now to use, but actually it's just hidden behind another tab, and it causes a lot of bugs this way. At least that's what I noticed at some point.
There's a common it's gonna escape the name of it now. It's gonna escape me. The default page controller. What's it? A default scroll controller. You know what I mean? Okay. The name of it's just escaped me. Primary scroll controller. There we go. I knew it'd come back to me. Primary scroll controller. So let's just load this up here. Does this work? Let's have a look. Yeah, so there's another thing that also kind of associates scroll control with a subtree, right? And most people don't realize that there is one scroll controller that's given to every screen for you as part of the route, and that's initialized as part of the primary scroll controller. This is why you can create a list view without scroll control, and it just works, right? And it keeps the position in the route. A lot of the time you might want to use this more often, which is to disassociate. So this means the entire subtree, let's say of a tab, doesn't associate itself with that primary scroll controller by adding in primary scroll controller.none. Or alternatively, host your own. So something I've done in an app before is when you have multiple, like a page view and you have multiple tabs or bottom navigation tabs or something, is that each page gets its own primary scroll controller attached to it with a scroll controller managed for it, so that the outside of those pages you can actually scroll the views and like press refresh and it pulls it to the top and all that kind of fun stuff, right? So I don't know, that was off topic, but yeah, hopefully that helped. I guess we'll carry on.
Can I add something to that?
Oh, sure.
All right, I was able to ditch Dorian, so hopefully we'll be okay now. I just had to work on a page where I had two different scroll controllers on the same page, and so it was actually a nested scroll controller, but then I had a nav bar that you could scroll on its own also. Anyway, the secret to that is you don't have to spike your own scroll controller. You can actually just say primary false, and it'll create its own for it.
Oh yeah.
And so I just wanted to take that.
Good call. All right, next question. Boolean asks, this works on web in the browser, but it does not work when running on iOS. JavaScript core because self is not defined. Do you know if there's a workaround?
I think we missed the first part of the question, right?
I thought I clicked both of them. I might have screwed up.
Oh, there's two parts to this. Hey mate.
Mm-hmm.
This is in regard to JS to Dart interrupt. I've registered JS objects into Dart's JS context objects so that it can be called from JavaScript. And then part two is this works on web in the browser, but it does not work on running iOS's JavaScript core because self is not defined.
Yeah, there's no DOM. There's no DOM in mobile. You can run a JavaScript engine, but it has nothing to do with anything related to the rest of your app. So you're not going to get JavaScript interaction that way.
So the thing is, I'm guessing that JavaScript core is part of iOS's SDK, which allows you to run JavaScript on the platform. I guess. I don't know. I've never used it.
I'm sorry.
I would, again though, that if you're trying to do particularly registering objects for callbacks, I mean, yeah, it's a shame you can't do that on iOS for sure. There is actually there's a few JS packages in Pub that offer the V8 engine running. I think it was the V8 engine running as part of your app. And maybe that helps solve your problem. I don't know of any workaround for that specific issue. When you do, I will mention that when you do allow interop, there is actually a different version of the. Oh, I can't remember now. There's actually a different version which defines this for you. So maybe that's what you're missing. Where is it? Let me just see if I can find it here. Allow interrupt capture this. I think this. I mean, go look this up. This should probably put you in the right direction, right? The wraparound called JavaScript package.js, passing the JS interrupt, passing JavaScript this as the first argument. Does that help? Maybe that helps solve your problem. I'll pop that in the chat. Hopefully that sort of direction's the right place. Good luck. Sorry. If those that don't know, like this is like self. Self and / this is the same thing. It's the idea of the current class that you're in, and JavaScript isn't really object orientated, and the whole process of that is a bit. It's a bit more complicated than that, right? With the prototype language. So anyway, that might help solve your problem. Hopefully that puts you on the right track.
And
feel free.
We need to say bye to Sarah, so let's say bye to Sarah.
Sarah.
Thanks, Randall. Yeah, it was really great to be with all of you. I can't do much right now, so hopefully after I've done my self-defined Flutter, it'll be more helpful.
Yeah.
But until the happy day,
And your audio is really, really breaking up and really, really bad.
Just wave and say goodbye.
So just
is it better now?
Oh
Yeah,
yeah. What happened?
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's because my mom was trying to call me on my phone and like went to my headphones and magic happened in the air.
Bluetooth.
Doesn't she know? Doesn't she know you're busy right now? Come on.
She does not. She could care less.
Doesn't she watch the show? She must watch the show to see you, right?
Yeah. So what I was saying is that I hope that I will be a more helpful technical person here in a few months after I've put in the time. But until that happy day, I am very happy to help anyone with like community stuff. So I am no longer the official contact person. I will send you directly to Anel, but like I'm still able to provide support and make connections and give ideas and stuff like that. So you have my Twitter handle somewhere. So all right,
Cool.
that's all I had to say.
Thanks, Sarah.
Sorry? Okay.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Sarah.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Sarah. And then there were four.
Then there were four.
Okay.
By the way, if you need to drop off either of you, just let us know. Anyway,
I'm good.
We're gonna these are the last questions now, so we're running down to the last few. So
Yep.
Is there best experience to using stateless widget and declare controllers inside block and dispose inside block close function, or to use stateful?
Use stateful widget.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, you can have you can call your block's close function in the dispose of stateful widget, and you can then allocate and get rid of your controller inside your block. Sure, I'm just like, why use stateless widget? What difference does it make to you? Like, it has no practical difference at all. I mean, if you really want to like make some magical thing, you can make yourself like a magical block widget that actually does call it for you, and then that way you just put that in its place and it does the same job, right? Like, you don't have to create a stateful widget each time. Literally make one that you hand it the block and it will call the close function of that block, and now you've just made a generic widget that you can put anywhere that does that, right? In fact, I think that is like, isn't it like a block provider or block listener or something like that does that kind of thing? I feel like there is. I forget, but yeah.
But I definitely think the controllers are really much closer to the, they're much closer tied to the UI portion of things than other stuff. So I would much prefer to have it in the widget, which means make a stateful widget. It's no big deal.
Yeah, I'd also say that, you can always have your block listen to the controller. So if it needs to know the scroll position for some reason, or it needs to maintain the scroll position, you can have that in your, before you call your close function, have it save the state of the pixels, the variable inside the controller, and then restore it in the constructor next time it opens it back up or something like that, if you want to do that. Yeah. All right. Next question. Train of thought. Can you guys suggest any open source app to understand state management, specifically block best practices?
Block documentation, I think, because it has a lot of examples, and these are quite decent ones. Mean of their size. I'm not aware of any like huge app. I think it was Inkino, something like that, using block. Maybe, because it's a long time since I checked that project.
How about the Very Good Ventures template app? That might be a good place to kind of look, right?
I mean, yeah, there's that one. I was going to say there is also the actual official sort of the repo for block. Actually, Flutter block has an example app. Well, yeah, it's just got main. That's not very much of an example, is it? I don't know. Oh, there's lots of examples in there. I don't know. Maybe there's more. I don't know of any particular one. I'd suggest you also look around at the videos. There's quite a few like videos around block and using it, which would also give you some information. Oh, look, Yeah.
Oh, and I called out very pictures, so we did that too.
Yeah.
So.
Oh look, I was completely looking at the wrong place. See, look, this is what I get. So look at the block top level examples, and there you go. Always lovely example. I knew there was somewhere. There you go. Always lovely example projects. Oh, to do. So yeah, they are there. I'll pop that list right in the chat for anyone that wants it. All right. Do we have some book like you don't know Dart inspired from You Don't Know JavaScript? Having not read those books and not even known that You Don't Know JavaScript actually exists, no, I don't think so. Is this? No, I've not heard of one. There's the answer to that, really. There are
and I'll say, I've got to say that what I always say about books is the development cycle for a book is on the order of a year, regardless of what's in the book. Almost all books, except the ones that you work on, are out of date the moment they're published. So it's a matter of making sure that the publisher is also providing addenda, and things like that, corrections as time continues. And because the Flutter and Dart world are moving forward so amazingly fast, it's really hard to have up-to-date information in any kind of collected information like that.
Where does Dart Apprentice still exist?
I think it does. I was going to mention Dart Apprentice, but then I was going to mention Dart Apprentice, but then I was going to kind of agree with Randall just because Dart might be undergoing a few changes in the next few.
Anything published today is going to be way out of date 6 months from now.
Yeah,
out of date.
Dart hasn't been going that fast, but it's about to move. It's about to make a big jump.
Yeah, I will also mention that there's lots of online material that's free, and even if it's paid for. So I know that there was some Flutter and Dart Apprentice books by Ray Wenderlich, which is now called CodeCo, and that what they do is that if you buy it online, they give you the updates. They give the errata. So as they update the book and they change it, you get those changes. So that kind of helps with that kind of problem. But there's lots of content online, including those that I've just posted in the chat. It'd be interesting to know, like I can see maybe an interesting book of maybe one of those books of cheap things to do or ways to structure your code and examples of that might make a good little book. But again, it would be out of date so quickly.
Yeah.
It would have limited shelf life.
Or like a cookbook for JavaScript programmers might be good.
Yeah.
The best docs are if you're looking for basic Flutter strategies, for example, the Google's docs on Flutter Dev are very, very good. There's a cookbook there that has about 40 different entries the last time I looked, which has sort of how do you do this with Flutter? And that's actually a great place to start because the doc team stays in close contact with the dev teams at Google. So they keep that website really, really up to date, and they're very responsive. I've submitted issues there and gotten response within a day where the website is now different because of something I said. So they're very, very good and cooperative and working with the community and keeping those things up to date. So I always tell people go there first. Go to Flutter Dev and Dart Dev first. There's a lot of great tutorial information there as well as all the good reference information. Start there. And then I have a kind of a standard blurb I post for people when they ask, what do I do to learn Dart and Flutter? And at the bottom of that, I say, and don't look at anything that's over 6 months old without consulting an expert first. Just because you might be learning practices that have been outdated, outmoded, maybe using flat button, instead of, or raised button instead of elevated button. I mean, there are still plenty of tutorials that people are referring to out there that are that old. Oh, and my favorite one is needing to get the username on a Firebase conversation, Firebase auth, and they think they have to wait for it because it's a feature. No, it hasn't been a feature for 4 years. It's gone. It's a current value now. Yeah.
That was always an actual big issue, I think, remember originally, yeah.
Right.
All right. We got 5 more questions in the queue. Let's nail through them.
Let's do them.
What is the best way to set different icons and name for different app flavors? Exactly that. You can just do that. So inside your native, inside when you build a schema, an iOS schema, you can choose to have a different name and icon in your config files. You can actually choose to have a different plist info file and use that. And then the same goes for Android. It's slightly easier. You can make a folder, and this is again, you're asking the problem is you're probably searching for the wrong things when you search for this online. You're probably searching Flutter icon, different names, app flavors. What you want to be searching for is Android, different icons and names for app flavors. And then the same goes for iOS. It'd be iOS, different icon and name for schema, app schema. However, to do it on Android, you basically make a folder with the flavor name inside your source directory, app source directory. Yeah. And then you make a folder in there. And inside that, you could put a res directory, which is your resource. And inside that, you put your drawable and map, HDMI, MDPI, all those kind of fun folders with your different icon sizes. And it would just magically be different. You can do the same thing there. We make an XML directory with values.xml and put in like a string with a different title. And then it would just literally, when you're using that flavor, it overrides. It's called manifest merging. It will basically merge the one that's more specific to the flavor that you're dealing with, which is what's inside those folders. But that's just literally an Android question or iOS question. I think that's the problem you're probably looking to solve. And again, you have to implement it in the Android and iOS directories. It's not something that Flutter will deal with for you because it's specific to the platform.
Yeah, there is also quite a popular package by the Flutter community. It's Flutter Launcher icons, and it does not change the app name, but it works with app icons for different flavors. So, for instance, you can even during your CI/CD pipeline, you could generate a specific icon for that particular pipeline, like whether that's testing environment or whatnot, and you could generate the icon just for that. I think the flavors is described somewhere down below there.
Yeah, there's lots of options, and I'm sure there's plenty of things you can look at. So I will leave that for the reader. Let's power through. All right, Jonathan says, if you manage the state in a store, can all your widgets be stateless? Yes. In fact, that's what what's the thing? What's the one you mentioned earlier?
Riverpod?
Was that? No, the state management widget literally is that.
A block? No. Redux?
No. Redux, yeah, Redux. Yeah, okay. So Redux, you have your store, and then all your widgets could be stateless, and they can all access the store using like all the time. I mean, yes, but because you have a state on a widget doesn't make it state, right? Like it's not that kind of thing. It's not your app state. It's local to the widget, right? So yes, you can, but why put you? I've seen people literally put themselves through this idea of every widget in my app has to be stateless, and I'm going to use Redux to store all my state, and it's a very, very bad idea.
I will say though that
you made yourself inflexible for no reason, right?
If you're dealing with something that has a little bit would have been a little bit declared in state, a little bit in init state, a little bit in build, and then needs something in dispose, take a look at hooks. Take a look at Remy's hooks, Flutter hooks package, because that abstracts across all four of those zones in a way that a stateful widget can't, because it has explicit separate callbacks for each of those. So hooks may be your answer. If you have a text editing controller or an animation controller or a page controller, that allows you to abstract that, still keep it a stateless widget, but have those four pieces coordinate in concert rather than having to do little pieces of your code in each one of those, which I find annoying, but it's sort of the traditional way to do that. That's why hooks save me from that.
And what I would add to that, just one more thing, is just the fact that if you make everything stateless like that, and when you rebuild, you're rebuilding everything. And so, if your store changes very often, you're going to have trouble.
I've seen before people make these sub stores and things with Redux, and like it just gets, just complicated for no good reason. It really doesn't make help. Anyway, let's move on.
Riverpod.
Auto route with navigator key and check in mounted property for showing dialog on Riverpod notifiers.
See, this is where I'm starting to get at again. This is what I'm saying. Don't your data shouldn't be demanding screen time. The screen should decide whether it wants to show something or not. So if you got some question like this, you're upside down somehow, and you have to think about what you really want to do.
And I think Simon described it really well earlier in that when you've got a totally non sequitur thing, it's not just the dogma of where you should be doing this versus where you shouldn't be doing it. The UX of itself, if you're popping stuff out without regard to what screen you're on or how you're doing it or what's going on, that is a very bad user experience. It's jarring. It's confusing. It's a bad user experience. And so I think that is probably a better reason than any kind of, because I would do it on Dogma. I would do it because that's not where it should be. That's not UI in the part there. But the practical side of that is just don't do it because it's bad. It's a bad experience.
Yeah. Bad UX. I mean, I think it's already bad enough that when I type a line in a chat area like Discord, that I'm now typing on the next line, and then all of a sudden I get the previous line turns to red or something because it didn't get sent. I already think that's jarring enough in terms of my thinking workflow, ability to dialogue with people. That's already bad enough. So to be on a different page and go, oh, by the way, that message you sent back there didn't make it into the database. What do I do? Yeah, really.
All right. Well, if your question didn't make it into the queue, I think that's it then for now.
Yeah. Well, we stopped sort of early. Nice.
So sort of early. Yeah, it's sort of early. Still going a bit longer than we want, but we're getting there. I want to say just a brief thing. I want to pop up on the stream here. Yeah, so the call for papers for FlutterCon is open for later on this year. So go to FlutterCon if you're interested in getting tickets or submitting a paper specifically. Maybe come to a talk. Check out fluttercon.dev. I'm going to do that every week. Every week I'm going to advertise that. Just make sure everyone knows it's
open for a while, right?
Yes, it's going to be open for a little while longer, so don't worry. There's still time to get in, but get in early because then that's why you get considered early. So, yeah. Right, all right. Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Mangirdas and Danielle. Thank you for.
Of course.
Go on.
I just wanted to say also that I popped into the chat a little earlier my talk at the SDSC the day after Flutter Forward that includes a lot of the things that happen at Flutter Forward, as well as context for past and future of Flutter as I see them. I'll pop that one more time into the chat, but go check that video out. I actually haven't seen all of it, but I performed all of it, so I know pretty much what was in there. So check that out.
All right. Well, thanks for coming, everyone. Thanks for
answering.
Come back.
Thank you, people.
I won't be here next week, but I should be here the week after. So.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, we'll see you then, and we'll see everyone watching next week. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Goodbye.